So this is a very typical scenario in Blender. You've created your model. I'm not sure what this is supposed to be really. It's some sort of strange duck, but it's really just for demo purposes. So we've got kind of a some areas that are supposed to be curved, some areas that are supposed to be sharp. We've got some extrusions here as well, and we kind of model our model, keep it as low poly as possible, so we can add in Subdivision Surface Modifier. And when we do that, it affects the geometry in a way that we don't really want it to. So we might shade also smooth. Okay, so we need to add some supporting loops. So we're going to take a little look in this tutorial how we would do that. So the first approach is using edge loops. So you do this by Control R, okay, and then we can begin to add our edge loops, okay, and as you can see there, that works nicely. We kind of flatten this edge, but we need to do it on each kind of part of the angle. So if I just do that here let's make this kind of a square again. As you can see, I'm adding in quite a lot of additional geometry here, and these loops go all the way around the mesh. Okay, so you can see that's gone all kind of the way around. That's okay, that's kind of helped here as well. So we can do that. I can control that as well, so I can get a nice transition there. I need to do the same on this one. So if I can continue doing that, it's quite a manual thing. Need one here and here. So this is a really effective way of doing it, of course, and it's kind of the first thing that you are likely to do in Blender for this kind of problem. But the obvious issue here is that one, we're adding lots of geometry, but of course we're adding geometry all over the mesh, whether we kind of want to or not. So if we now go into object mode, you can see what's happened on the curved area here is that we've got some shading problems because we've now got these edges really close together. So you could do kind of a lot of work to try and fix that. You could merge these vertices together, but you'll end up with tries elsewhere. So to avoid the triangles, you would need to do kind of a lot of work with the retopology. So it's not always the most kind of useful in that sense. It's helpful to kind of have the control, but that is a obvious downside with using supporting loops. So the pros of using edge loops is that you get that kind of precise control. It maintains quads and it is universally supported. So if you to export your model into a game engine or something like that, it'll be supported perfectly fine. But the obvious cons from this approach would be it increases the geometry. It can disrupt your topology. So as you saw there with the kind of the edge loops going all the way around the mesh and then affecting other parts of the mesh that you don't want it to. And it's quite a manual process as well. Next up, edge crease. So let's take a look at edge crease. So to use edge crease, again, you select your edges. I'm going to select all 4 edges here. I can do this, obviously, let's just do all 4 at the same time. And if I hit Shift E and pull back, that starts to sharpen. Okay, so I've gone all the way up to 1 there, and that creates a very sort of strong, sharp crease. So let's just do it to kind of the rest of this area so I can demonstrate that. So Shift E, and again you can pull, or you can just type in, say 1. If I go into object mode now, you get that's a very, very sharp crease. So what I find myself doing when using this actually is not going all the way to 1. So it's not quite as harsh. So Shift E, maybe 0.9 for example, and that just gives it a slight bit of softness, but it doesn't always work out very well. You can see there that that's causing kind of shading issues. Let's see if that looks any better. I'll just take the view of that off while I select this edge as well. Let's put that back on, Shift E, and I can just do that manually until it gets to a point where it looks okay. Okay, and again, it's really, really quite sharp, isn't it there? with edge crease. But the benefit that we have got is I've managed to get this area sharp without affecting other areas. So I'm not adding in any geometry or anything here. It's just very, very simple, very, very helpful for that reason. I think in this case, this is where I would prefer to use kind of a supporting loop, because I can put it kind of about here and I get a much nicer transition. But obviously there I'm adding in the additional geometry. So the pros of edge crease is that there's no extra geometry. It's a non-destructive way of creating those sharp edges. You can always go back and change them, and it's relatively quick and easy to do. The cons though are that there's limited control. You don't have that fine control and those transitions that we saw on the model. It's not always compatible, so if you do sometimes export this into other software, it may not necessarily know how to deal with edge creases properly, and it can cause shading artifacts in some instances. Thirdly, bevels. So let's take a look at bevels. So bevels kind of work similar to adding support loops in that you're adding additional geometry. So let's just say we wanted to sharpen the bottom here. We can hit Control B and that will bevel. We can control, one of the benefits of a bevel is you can control kind of how many loops. You can also control the shape of a bevel much more. That gives kind of a much more natural edge, that additional kind of control. So you can see there at the bottom, we've got kind of a nice bevel there. You can control the shape, that kind of thing. But really, in reality, I find myself using the bevel modifier. So let's just generate a bevel modifier that would need to go above the subdivision surface. And you can kind of see straight away there, we've got our sharp edges are looking a little more sharp now, and our kind of rounded edges, such as the head here, are quite smooth still. Okay, so this is currently using the angle method, and this is basically saying that anything with an angle less than sort of 60 degrees or 30 degrees or whatever angle you decide to use, it will kind of create a bevel there, and therefore for these rounded edges, as long as that angle isn't exceeded, it will keep them rounded and not add a bevel there. So you can kind of control the size of the bevel. You want to get it a little finer, for example, and make it a little sharper. You can up the segments as well. So I've clicked 2 there and that has clipped. So let's just go into geometry and we'll uncheck the clamp overlay. If you go too high with that, it just won't work. So that works really well. We've got some issues here. So that's what the clamp will have been doing the job on. So the clamp just stops any of the geometry kind of going over itself. So you can see that's worked pretty well in the case for this model, but let's say you actually wanted to only add bevels in and you wanted more control about which edges you wanted to do that to. Okay, so you can change the limit method to weighted, and then straight away it's almost like the bevel's not kind of working now, but the way you would use it is you can select your edges. So let's just select these edges here. Then on the panel here on the right, you've got edges, data, mean, bevel, weight, and then you're able to, basically it's like assigning exactly where you want your bevel to work. So that gives you much more control using the bevel modifier, which I think is very helpful. The previous way of using it with angle is almost like just kind of a rule. So if your geometry works with that, then great. But if it doesn't, this allows you to have that additional bit of control. So the pros with bevels is it creates nice realistic edges. It's a customizable shape as well, so you can change kind of how the bevel interacts and how the bevel appears on your mesh. If you use the modifier as well, it's non-destructive, so you can completely kind of go back. It doesn't actually change your model at all. The cons though are, again, it increases the geometry on your model. It can therefore cause some disruption to your topology, particularly in corners. If you've got kind of many corners all going to a certain point, if you try and bevel all of those corners, you can create glitches, and it can be manual effort. So particularly if you're doing it by hand, or even with the bevel modifier, if you're using the weighted approach, you need to kind of go in there manually and set your bevel, edge, and weight. So these are the three methods that I use most often for kind of controlling, supporting loops in Blender. I don't think one is better than any other. I think actually usually I use a combination of all three to get kind of the results that I need. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.